How you going? All right? I know some of you have heard me, a couple of you have heard me speak before, and I don't apologise for that. I've been asked to do something that I've done a few times recently. So if you've heard me before, can you please laugh at the jokes? Just, be with me, help me be there. I don't know that I'm an ex-teacher. I think once you're a teacher and you're into that space, I don't think it ever leaves you. I think the notion of learning... In fact, we do a lot of work with leaders all around the world, as Bernie said, and I think leadership really is this kind of a number of aspects that I think I should be clear right up front. One is I think leadership is a privilege. It's bloody hard often. I'm not going to pretend that. It's bloody hard. But it is also a privilege, and it's also an opportunity to make a difference, and I think we all get that and you get that. I think this thing about learning is interesting. I was so pleased to be here earlier and listening to Jon. I just think that was an amazing presentation. I feel a little embarrassed to be coming after him. I just want to keep talking about what he was saying and doing going on to that. But I do think that leadership is about learning. We know that the leaders that make a difference in any sector is they understand they're never finished. It's an issue of learning and continuing to learn and continue to liberate. I love the notion that Jon was talking about leadership as entrepreneurs, as that notion we liberate others. If we think about that as an act of leadership, that starts to free us up as well. So yes, I taught in Tasmania, which is where all the problems start. I know that. Not yet. I taught, and then I went on to run the ABC's education unit. So it's been part of me. In fact, I wrote Play School, which is interesting hearing about the journeys of young kids and playing, working with very young kids is really quite interesting, having them be part of the program making capacity. So, where do we start? Well, first of all, I'm a Collingwood supporter, in case that's relevant to anybody in the room. Oh, no, nothing. Right, fair enough. You're a bloody hard audience, never mind. And I do spend way too much time on an aeroplane. And I feel lucky that I love what I do. I feel so privileged to do that. One of the guys that I got to interview many years ago was a guy called Peter Drucker. And you may know the name. He was seen to be one of the big thinkers of the 20th century. And it's interesting, he defined himself as a teacher too. And did spend a moment as a teacher way back. But this notion of culture, study record, was something he said all the time. And I'm just going to give you a second to talk to the person next to you. And you can substitute pedagogy for strategy, training, structure, I don't care what you put in there. And Peter wasn't suggesting that strategy was unimportant, but he was suggesting something different. I'd be interested to take 2 minutes, 1 minute, with the person next to you, and just, does that make sense? One, which you've already would have decided, and two, what do you reckon is the biggest lever for culture? 1 minute. Does it make sense? What do you reckon is the biggest lever? Approximately true. There is no such thing as a truth, but is it approximately true? Let's get a show of hands. So most of us think that that's true, and I'm sure we can have a debate about that. It's not saying that one is more or less important than the other. It really is important. It does kill. I have been in organisations that have had the best strategy, the best kind of stuff, the best policies, and it's a crap place to work, and nothing really gets done. And I've been in other places, other schools, where maybe it's just not quite as rich as you would hope in lots of ways, but the culture's so good, the place just hums. And I'm sure that's true for many of us. And of course, the question that I asked about that is, what is the single most important factor for you? Whether you like it or not, it's you. And it's not the big rocks, it's the little bits. It's how do you show up moment to moment. The big confronting question for leaders in the 21st century is this. Well, it's two actually. One is, how does the room change as you enter it, before you open your mouth? It's a confronting question. What do you cause before you open your mouth when you go into a room? Yeah? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had bosses in the past where you sort of, the first thing goes through your head is something like, hope she's had a good day. The last wedding was all right. There was one person I worked for, it was the CEO of a large Australian organisation, which I won't mention, and we used to ring up his executive assistant for a weather report. What's with that? Oh, it's stormy, right? Shit, not going there today. You would. The first question is how does the room change when you enter it? Really, what do you cause? Think about leadership as an act of cause. What do you cause? And the second question is, of course, how does the room change when you leave it? Because leadership is an act of liberation. If you've got to be there, you're spending too much time. You've got to be liberating others to do things. It's a confronting notion. Or this sort of idea, I don't do mornings. Oh, good. We'll pay you half then. So the other thing about this thing about culture and you and how you show up moment to moment is this. It's about conversations. If you think about how much of your time is actually spent in a conversation, whether it's conversation, how long? Is it 80%, 90%, 95%? And we're running so fast, the world is changing so much, as we heard this morning. How much of those conversations are valuable? All of them? 50% of them? 40% of them? Just take meetings. So this notion of leadership on purpose is really this notion of am I intentional? Am I purposeful? Am I taking notice around what I'm causing? So I want you to sort of think about, am I actually present in this conversation? I'm going to show you a way of thinking about conversations. But before I do, I'll just tell you a quick story. When I wasn't a consultant, my dad, I think, was proud of me. Well, I think he's still proud of me. He's in his late 80s now. And when I became a consultant, he was kind of, you do what? They pay you to do that, really? I said, well, Dad, what we do is we are as best we can be, an evidence-based consulting company, and we give people ideas and possibilities and have them think about how does it relate to them. And I can't teach you how to run a school. That would be just ridiculous. It's been way too long since I've been in a school. In any case, your school is different to your school. So how do I know how to do that? But I can show you some stuff that I would like you to pause and think about. So my dad now describes what I do by virtue of his own university education. He went to the University of York in England, and obviously many years ago, where he read mathematics and English, to use the Australian English parlance. Anyhow, the orientation, I don't know what you call it, ritual for his particular college, which was an all-male college, was these very young men who were just about to embark on a university career would get into the foyer at the bottom of their college. They'd take all their clothes off, and the idea of appearance being naked is never very nice, but nevertheless, and then they would run as a kind of herd through the city of York and jump into the river, have a bit of a swim, and then run all the way back. Well, my dad's cohort had just got out of the river. All these young men are standing there naked, and a punt comes around the corner full of women. And my father does this. And the guy next to him, who's a philosophy student, does this. And said, I don't know about you, James, but around here I'm known by my face. And I kind of like that story. It's my dad's, he tells it all the time, I presume, therefore it's true. But it's this notion of how often do you converse like this? Do you just do the automatic? How often do you think about what is it called for right now? I just want you to think and pause for the next 40 minutes about how you have conversations. I don't want to go into the deficit. I also loved Holmes' notion about we spend too much time in deficit. I would much prefer to go into appreciation. So I just want to show you some possibilities and have you think about that. So, the first thing we know about conversations about human beings is this, that we all have things that we care about. Well, you might call purposes, things that matter to me deeply. There was a guy in the 1960s, just lost his name for a second, but he had this great notion of thinking about human beings at work as having two elements. Now, it's artificial, but he talks about who we are. So I'm Colin, with all those things that matter to me as a Colin, as a whatever age I am and everything else. And then there's what I do. We might call those accountabilities or job descriptions. But if you like, they're promises to a system. And what we often get caught up in is spending too much time in conversations over here about what I am as opposed to who I am. If you think about that notion of the entrepreneurial spirit, the notion of creativity, that we would have listened to from Jon this morning. Where does that come from? From my whatness or my who-ness? From my sense of Colin or from my accountabilities are? You tell me, where's it come from? Who? It's who I am, essentially who I am. So, unless we're having conversations with Colin, he gives a rat's really about his accountability to some extent. That liberation, that place of energy, has got to be about what I care about. What are my purposes? What matters to me? Well, I'll tell you a few things. And you can't argue with me because they're mine. So what do I care about? I care about stuff like, I actually think organisations, any organisation, is full of people, not full of jobs. That deeply and profoundly matters to me. I think that if we create organisations, whether it be schools, hospitals or banks, where people really feel liberated and purposeful and have a good life, the whole of our community benefits from that. Just think at the simple level. You have a shitty day when you go home, if you happen to live with somebody, what is the role and effect of that? So having a great day at work, not every day is great, but having a great day at work, that has a huge impact beyond work. So that I care about. That's why I do the work that I do. The reason I think I make a difference, if I make any difference, is by having organisations full of great people doing great things that actually makes the whole planet a better place. Now, family matters to me. I really care about my family. I know I spent some time historically not doing that as well as I might have done. I used to use this phrase, quality time. What a bullshit notion is that? I was solid out here. No, time is time. And I didn't take care of that, but now I tell you it does matter. And I refuse some work because it takes away from my family for too long. I will fly back from Singapore for a weekend to go back up there because I want to be with my kids for a birthday. It matters that much to me. I take care of that. I've got worries. You all have. We all have. You know, what am I concerned about? Well, of recent time I've been spending a lot of with young and emerging leaders. Those in their late teens and early 20s. And I love it. It's terrific, except I get worried. Am I too old for that? You know, I do this for a telephone. They've got no idea what I'm doing. I've got to do this. You know? And I worry about that. And it's a fair thing to worry about. When I was on air in the ABC, I got to interview lots of people. I feel very privileged to have had that job for a while, for about 10, 12 years. And everybody that I admired who was a leader suffered from the imposter syndrome. You know, kind of, who am I to be in front of all these people having this conversation right now? I mean, anybody who's any good course has to have self-doubts. If you're trying to do stuff that matters, you're going to always have moments of self-doubt. So I worry about those things. Do you have those moments? Do you suddenly go, holy crap, look how many people I'm responsible for? Shit. And that's fair, it's reasonable. So we have those. I've got other concerns too. There's certain facts that matter to me. You know, I do have a certain age on my driver's licence. I've got grey hair. I'm losing hair at the back of my head. I mean, all that's just the truth. You know, my kids are now in their 20s. I've got a grandson who's 4. That's changing my life. They're my circumstances. So they're just the facts. And so, do you talk to, when you are talking to people in your education community, are you talking to what they are, some sort of label, or are you talking to Colin, or Ruth, or Dulcie? And I challenge you to look at your last 20 emails. Did you write to who or what? It's confronting. I get it wrong a lot. So, if you want to really be connected, really liberate people, that entrepreneurial spirit, if you like, that Hong talked about, that's what you've got to be connecting with. Let me give you a really good example, and it's a big example. I don't always share it, but I will. I had the great fortune many years ago to work with Nelson Mandela, and I couldn't believe it. Talk about the imposter syndrome. Holy crap! Why would he want to talk with me? And I was working with a colleague in Europe. We got this telephone call, and I'm an Australian. I've got bullshit detectors. And this call comes through, and I was pretty convinced it was somebody, one of my friends, putting on an accent. And I'm about to say, and Kate Young goes, hang on a second, it just might be. And it turned out it wasn't him, it was somebody from his office. And we went to work for him and did this huge piece of work his idea was this. He wanted to get the 5 southernmost African countries to do way more collaboration around children, education, health, etc. And he said, none of us are wealthy in these countries. We're relatively local, geographically connected. Let's see if we can share stuff, share research, share best practice, etc. Although best practice wasn't a big phrase back then. We're thinking, holy crap. You do that in one country. You try and get education specialists, health specialists, politicians, bureaucrats, blah, 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 in a room together to collaborate and cooperate. That's hard enough. Across 5 countries. Plus in Africa, you've got the whole overlay of tribes, the Shona, the Zulu, etc. So you want complexity? That's complexity. He said, I thought about that. He said, we're going to call this a future for our children. Now, before I'm going to tell you some more about it, but already you can hear, he's not got some bureaucratic title, inter-country collaboration for the rights and blah. No, it's about children. Now, whether you're a bureaucrat or a doctor or a teacher, you're still interconnected. Does that make quick sense? Am I making sense here? You of all people understand that national purpose. So we started, and it was half a day, 2 full days and a half a day. And the first half day went just great. We had 650 people. We used what's called a search conference process, where there were no speeches. It was all about organised conversations and collecting ideas. First half day was great. The second day, it just began to unwind. All that would talk about why it wouldn't work. Why we haven't got enough money. Won't work because we're a politician in a coalition and therefore we can't bring our coalition partners with us. It's going to be too hard. The bureaucrats are talking about the fact that the computer systems won't talk to each other. Lots of valid and good reasons why it wouldn't work. And the whole thing started to wind down. And we were lost, to be honest. And we went to Mandela and said, can you say something? He said, I won't say anything. He said, I can call these people to some sort of order. He said, it'll be a false dawn. They'll come with me, they've got to come together with themselves. Which at the time I went, bastard. But actually, it was a really smart thing. He was an extraordinary man to understand that stuff. And we got into the afternoon and we were already worried, Kajana and I. And the Zulu grandmother got up. And she's relatively large. I suspect, I don't know exactly, of course, I suspect somewhere in the late 60s. We learned later she was actually a doctor, the paediatrician. But that's not how she stood up. She stood up as a grandmother. Beautiful purple gown, gold kind of braid. And she just stood up and she looked at the room and she said, you have all forgotten my grandchildren. You've all forgotten my grandchildren. And she began to sing a Zulu lullaby. Let me tell you, it changed the room. It so changed the room. Because it mattered so deeply and so profoundly. And people began, and I'm going to make a fool of myself, she began to do that kind of Zulu dance. See, look like a complete prat now, don't I? But that kind of movement, and she grabbed this person's hand with this person's hand. And within about 30 seconds, the whole room is kind of holding hands and moving. Let me tell you, she changed that part of the country. Not as much as we would have liked, but she certainly changed it. The computer systems still couldn't talk to each other. There still wasn't enough money. There were still issues of coalition, parliamentarians, etc., etc. But now people began to move to what they could do as opposed to what they couldn't do. She shifted the notion of deep purpose in that room. I have never forgotten that moment. It still brings tears to my eyes. It's amazing. So that's what that says. Are you connecting with the human spirit? Are you connecting what you care about and what really matters to you, what it's about? And we get caught up in all the complexity, and of course we do, and the tough stuff, and everything else. But at the essence, do you do this, or do you think about conversation doing that? So, I want to play with this notion of conversation really fast. So would the person next to you, we'll do this quickly, it's not a role play. It's alright, role plays don't work anyway, the evidence tells us that. It's a real play. So, get into pairs, you've got 30 seconds, just 30 seconds. I want you to decide on a really complex issue that's true to you in your school. That's difficult, intractable, it's keeping you awake at night. You've got 10 seconds to explain yours, you've got 10 seconds to explain yours, and then you've got 10 to decide which one's the most difficult, and that's the one you're going to choose. Your 30 seconds starts now, go. one over there? Can everybody whose issue is going to be discussed? So you've decided one person's issue. So if it's your issue, put your hand up quickly so I can see. Please put your hand up so I can see. Look around if you've got issues, just so you know. Okay, so you're going to use yours. Did I see your name? Is that all right? Peter, thanks, Peter. And you've got two helpers, have you? You're a needy man. All right. So I wanted to go really quickly through this because it's actually common sense. It doesn't necessarily mean it's common practice. So the first thing is I just want to give you a basic architecture of any conversation. It's wrong. All models are wrong, as Edward Deming said, but some are useful. So don't see this as a truth. See it as true enough. See it as a useful and possible way of thinking about stuff. So any conversation I have is kind of my view of what's going on. There's kind of your view of what's going on. Then there's some sort of facts that sit there. And so the challenge for most of us is can we actually start in a place where we actually feel connected? What that grandmother did that I talked about, regardless of what was different, wrong and inappropriate, found a place for us to stand at something we cared about together, something that would hold us together even in complex, difficult and sometimes really worrying circumstances. And you know that about kids. You do that naturally, most of you. With kids, in many cases, you begin to talk to them about what matters. It's what we do with kids. We seem to lose it, mind you, when we start talking about having adult conversations. We call it intersections. Start there. And because there's lots of reasons why we don't start there. Well, what are they? We've got biases. What would you know? You're only a man. What would you know? You're too old. What would you know? Blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. There's issues of ego. Yes, but I'm the boss. You're not. And vice versa. All those things. Time. I haven't got time for this touchy-feely crap. We've got school to run. Hidden agendas. There's myriad reasons. Physiologically, we actually designed to see a difference. It's actually kept us alive. You go back thousands and thousands of years, we're out there in the bush, there's Bertie and I out there in the bush, and behind this shrub is a saber-toothed kangaroo. The one of us that sees it first, that little movement of an ear, that little kind of difference in colour, is the one that survives. So it's hardwired into our body. So unless we are conversating on purpose, we will typically default all the time to why you're wrong and what's different. So it becomes important to think about this notion of intersection. In real life, it looks more like this, of course. Because we're passionate, because we care, because we're under pressure. And so it's also, again, we are driven all the time to be like this. So it's a moment of can we often enough escape the tyranny of our own certainty. And that's tough. So let's play. A very simple kind of model. Remember, all models are wrong and some are useful. We've looked at thousands and thousands of conversations, quite literally, listen to them. And so we began to find some categories of interaction. Now, I've put up here 4 big ones. Frankly, there's probably 4,000. I could break these down into tiny little sections. So pretense is where I'm actually pretending to be in a conversation, but I'm not really. Sincere is where I'm telling the truth. Accurate is where I'm moving to separating the facts from my opinion. And authenticity is where I'm looking at deep purpose. So I'm going to take you quickly through these. Very quickly through these two, and then take a little bit more time over here. And this is about getting to value. It's a shocking piece of jargon. We should find something else. But really is how quickly can we make this conversation of some value, of some use. That's what that's about. How quickly can we do that? In a complex world with so much to do. Yeah? So let's start with pretense. Now what I want you to do here is Peter and Ruth. So just, you're not going to be public, it's alright. So Peter, it's his issue. He's the man with an issue here, right? And what I want you to do, Ruth, is this is only going to take 30 seconds. So it's going to be quick hit and feel. And I want you, Ruth, to sort of say, well, tell us more about your issue. And the moment Peter starts to sort of tell you, I want you to kind of switch off. I don't want you to be rude and turn your back on him, but I just want you to sort of, just kind of pretend. So it could look something like this. Remember, I used to write for a place where I'm allowed to have an imaginary... You've got what? Huh? Sorry? You've got to go and do a presentation to the school council? Yeah, you'll be fine. Don't you worry about that. You still... Look, don't come in with a problem, come in with a solution. Is that okay? Yeah, yes. Yeah, fine, good. Very good, be nice, yeah. What time's that meeting on Friday? You got it. Go. Just take 30 seconds, go. Ask a question and then actually not be really present. Go for it. Some of you are absolutely brilliant at this. The man over there listening by looking at the ceiling. It was really good. So just pile with that. Now, I just want you to have a taste of it. Now, just assume that kind of went on for 10 minutes. We talk about the mood of a conversation and the value. Let's start with the value. Assume it went on for 10 minutes. Within the bounds of common sense. Recognising you're being playful and anything else, but okay. If 1 is no value at all, the regular value, and 10 is very valuable, what score would you get if you kept that going? Would you give it? Count it out. 1, 0, minus 1? Absolutely. I'm more interested in some ways in the mood that it creates. Again, think if it had gone for 10 minutes, what did it feel like to be on the end of that kind of listening? Give me some words, adjectives. Shut down, give me some more.
Not valued.
Devalued, rude, ignored, patronising, hear it all. How did it take you to feel that? Even though it's playful, how did it take you? Nanoseconds. Now here's the rub. How many meetings, let's just take meetings, have you been in doing the Blackberry prayer? How many meetings have you been in when you've been doing reading something and doing some... They're big, gross examples. How often? And think about what does that mean you're causing. Really. You know, we have these neurons in our brain. They're called, I don't know the technical term, but they're basically mirror neurons. And if you are critical to my identity or safety, then I absolutely notice how you are being in this nanosecond from the beginning. I notice. And I can't help but notice. And so if you're doing anything that's not being present, I know. And that feeling you just have is the one you create. It's a very confronting notion. By the way, Apple, we heard about this morning, these are banned in Apple meetings. Now, I think it's a challenge because as we become more connected, we do need to have some of those things. But in Apple meetings, particularly in their leadership meetings, they're banned. And I don't mean they're on the table, switched down. I mean they're out of sight and switched off. And the Apple view is really clear in their organisation, which is this. We want you to be very present in this meeting right now. We'll have somebody else record what needs to be recorded. I want you to be in the meeting. If the issue is so important you need to have your phone on, probably you shouldn't be in the meeting. And that's fine. We'll make sure you get caught up. And the second one's really interesting, which is if you can't be away from your system for an hour or two without being connected, you shouldn't be a leader in our organisation. It's quite a confront if you think about it like that. David Thodey's just done the same thing in Telstra. Now, it's a challenge because right now there are people here taking notes, as you should be on some of these devices. But what's interesting is that people actually can tell whether you're taking notes or doing emails. I'm serious. My wife, I'm sure there's a camera in our office. Because I'll be on the phone to my wife and she'll suddenly go, "You're doing your emails." What we've learned is this from the neuroscientists, is that you breathe in rhythm to whatever you're concentrating on. So if I'm talking to my wife, theoretically, but I'm doing emails, her brain is smart enough for an intuition to kick in. She knows that I'm not actually present on the telephone call. So you might think you're kidding everybody, you're kidding nobody. It's confronting, I get it. And so, let me keep going. So have you ever done this? Or a version of that? I mean, we don't live in that kind of world. How often have you done that? Worse, how often you've had people leave your meetings and say that. That's the challenge. So this notion of being, by the way, the Apple evidence, because they put this in about 3 years ago, the Apple executives reckon that they have halved the number of meetings and halved the meeting time. Now, would you like that time back? Because that would be just a great thing to have. What else could you be doing? Just by doing something is... Now, I'm not saying this is all about telephones and anything else. So let's go to the sincere space. Now, the sincere space, we've been very careful with the word. It's not in itself a negative word, but what I'd love you to do is to play with what it feels like to be in one of these conversations. So this time, Ruth, I want you to be unbelievably valuable. I want you to be a tsunami of value to Peter, right? The moment he begins to tell you something, I want you to tell him how to fix it. With your wealth of experience, your different perspective on the world, you go for it. So it looks something like this. You what? You got to do a presentation school. Okay, it's fantastic. You know, you should go to... come here. You should go to this website. It's a great HBR website. It's all about Prezi. It's just amazing. It'll be so intriguing. And the other thing you need to know about any presentation's got 3 critical bits. Beginning, middle and end. And get them in the right order. You'll be a winner. You go for it. Go. Be a tsunami valve. So this is interesting, for me anyway. You are telling your truth, sure, and you're wanting to be, it's not about bad people, and you're well-intentioned. Let's assume that. Now, again, let's assume it's one for 10 or 15 minutes, longer than we went, you get the feel. In terms of value, 1 being not very valuable and 10 being valuable, give me a number. 3, what else? 2, well-intentioned, but not that valuable. And that, how did it feel? What did it feel like to be on the end of that tsunami of value? Give me some words. Frustrating. Give me some more. Help me out.
Therapy.
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 Syrupy and therapy, heard them both. Patronising, absolutely. How quickly did it come to that? This notion somehow that because it's my truth, it's valuable, is such an arrogant place to sit. Well-intentioned nonetheless. See, there's the thing about when you're in this place, the only people you convince are the people who already agree with you. The only people you convince are the only people who already agree with you. And if you go back to this morning's brilliant presentation, we're in a world where we've got to be valued in difference, we've got to be doing all those different diversities, different intelligences. So what would have you have the mortgage on the truth? How can that be an act of liberation in the creativity and cleverness of others? It just cannot inspire. What we tend to do when we're in this space, well-intentioned, is we file a situation. Do you file people? I file people. D for dickhead. B for bitch. C for challenging. Do you know, and we hear 5 sentences or 5 words on how to fix that. Yeah? That's created a dependency upon you. That's it. That's the best you can say about it. That is not an act of liberation, it's not an act of allowing us to be clever, and it's not an act of learning. Leadership is an act of learning. Yeah? I fire people, I'm really bad at it. I mean, I try so hard. Some years ago now, I know Marina's heard the story because I told her not long after it happened to me. My wife turned 50, and we were at a Cafe Sydney, in Sydney. I live in Melbourne, but we're in Sydney, and it was terrific. It's on the quay. You can see the Opera House, you can see the bridge. It's gorgeous, and it's 3 or 4 stories of sandstone building. It's just great. We're having the best time. Her birthday, I love my wife to bits, so I'm really fortunate about that. And it's about 10:30, and yes, I had, you know, a couple of glasses or 3 of champagne and a bottle of red, and, you know, the edit button's gone. And this is a completely true story. Talking about therapy. And they put you in pretty tight. And there's a couple here, we're having a great time. All of a sudden, this woman pulls out the mobile phone. Right. Now, I'm allergic to people using mobile phones in restaurants. So she's now filed under R for rude cow ruining my night. And I am a communication and conversation specialist. I know exactly how to improve her night and everybody else's. This is a learning opportunity for her, and I'm going to help. Now, I'm not pretending. I'm in this sincere space. Now, the trouble with this is we talk about people being in here as suffering from certainty. How often do you suffer from certainty? Because the other thing is when you're suffering from certainty, you only hear things that prove that you're right. You have no curiosity. You have no capacity to learn. Yeah? And we talk to teachers about don't file kids. Don't label them. We know that pedagogically, yet when we come as leaders, we often do exactly the thing we say we shouldn't do with kids. So I filed under after recap. I am now certain, and I am no longer curious. If had I been even a little bit curious, I would have, for example, looked and noticed the incredible pride on this man's face. I might have listened to a few words that she was saying and see the boundless joy she obviously had in her face. I would have noticed my wife's look of horror because she knows who I am. Worst of all, I might have noticed the little white box in the middle of the table is now empty. Did not notice. I lean across with my great powers of capacity of learning and conversation. Excuse me. Very quiet, notice that, no shouting. Excuse me. Yep. Okay. You're very loud on the phone, do you know that? By the way, this is not a call centre, it's a cafe, it's a restaurant. Cafe Sydney, not cafe call centre. Okay? Would you put your phone down because you're ruining everybody's night? Particularly mine and my wife's. Okay? I'm telling the truth. The guy turns to me and goes, mate, I've just asked her to marry me. She said yes, and she's ringing her mum. Are you okay with that? My father! I mean, it's not always quite that bad. I did make peace and a very expensive bottle of French champagne and another thing. She was really nice, I have to say this. My night did not finish as I might have hoped. But how often do you get hooked in? Particularly when you're running and rushing. How often do you get hooked in to fix it and solve it? And to give your opinion way too early. So this is what happens, of course. You see this, it's a kind of tree there. I'm a line drawer, not a tree mover. The moment you begin to sincerely dominate people, they lose all capacity for discretionary effort. That is a really important notion. So, what we say here is that people are it's a bit about protecting yourself. Am I credible? It's a good thing to worry about, but not to force. I'm fearful of failure, of course. Often it's a natural emotional reaction, but as a leader you've got to hold with it. And so we talk about people over this side becoming curious. Leadership is an act of curiosity. In every moment, what can I learn here? What can I see that I don't currently see? In every situation. So I'd like you to play with this very simple, and I'm just going to take a couple minutes for this one. I'd like you, Ruth, to just on a piece of paper there, just draw a T. On this side have facts, and this side have explanation. And now, if you're going to be curious, what's got to come out of your mouth? Questions. It's a no-brainer. And I'm certainly not going to bore you or patronise this notion of open and closed questions. You all would understand that. But what's interesting is when we also listen to meetings, particularly, it's amazing the number of meetings we listen to either on tape or live, and there are no questions asked. Or they are pretend questions. But don't you think blah, blah, blah? That ain't a question. That's a statement. Or those terrible things. Let me just play the devil's advocate here. Bullshit. You just decide you're just trying to be a bit more graceful in how you disagree with me. I have no problem with disagreement. I have a problem with when we talk about this. It's a timing issue for me. So, good questions have no content. Tell me more about that. What does he say that? Particularly that wellspring of, I know what to say. Is the very what to go? Tell me more about that. Literally sit with your own discomfort and allow to see what you can see. What can you learn? So, what I want you to do, Ruth, is to just ask Peter questions. And as he does that, say, is that a fact or an explanation? Do we think we all agree with that? Or is it something else? Is it an opinion? Well, why do I call them facts and explanations? Well, last year I was doing some work in New Zealand, actually with one of the banks there, and I was actually meeting with the board and the executive team. Very conservative joint. And I raced out, Sunday night, raced to the airport. I'm just dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, pretty crappy jeans. And I'll grab a business shirt, pair of black pants, put them in the case and taken off. It's a 7 o'clock start at a breakfast. I open my suitcase, my wife's black pants. And she is your size. They're not going to fit. So I start to see with these crappy jeans on and a business shirt, right? Now, that's a fact. There are multiple explanations, depending on how those people filed me. One could be, the typical bloody consult from over the ditch. No respect. There's one explanation. He's a creative sort of guy. I'm sure he's wearing this sort of gear because he's just trying to perturb us a little bit. I mean, and then the third one was what I just said. I mean, we all have these explanations. That's what makes us smart. What makes us smarter is when we actually work out what are facts and what are our own opinions or explanations. That's what starts to become smart. As I'm listening to you, what are the facts here and what are the explanations, and make sure we begin to make that kind of difference. And be alert to that. That becomes a discipline. So, 3 minutes, that's all. Have a conversation. Be curious. Now, let me tell you, it's harder than you think. For the first minute, it'll be easy. You'll go, tell me more about that, let you say that. And then you go, I want to be really valuable here, so I'm going to think of a really clever question to ask Peter. The moment you're doing that, what have you stopped doing? Listening. So really hold with staying curious. Allow whatever gets revealed to be revealed. Don't go into certainty and don't even go into cleverness. Just stay curious. You've got 2.5 minutes now. Go. And I absolutely acknowledge that a very short time I'm just getting a taste of this. But again, if you exploit this out, if this went for 15 minutes, again, just think about value and mood, give it a potential score out of 10 for value. Give me a number. 6. 7. We've already upgraded it. If you begin to think conversation is an act of learning rather than an act of telling, that in itself makes a shift. And how did it feel to be in that space? Give me some words.
Listen to.
Listen to. Give me some more. Value. Give me some more. Empowered. Holy crap, imagine if they were the words that were used for every meeting you were in and every conversation you're in. Imagine that. You know what? And you can. Just by doing that. It sounds so obvious, yet we don't do it. We rush. This is about slowing down to speed up. I know you work ridiculous hours. I know you work when you're asleep and I'm serious. It goes on in your head the whole time. Just imagine if you could liberate even 20 minutes a day. Would that be worth slowing down for? I mean, that's the irony. Leadership is an act of learning and an act of curiosity. I'm going to push you one more in. I'm going to go one bit further. I want you to go to what we call the authentic, if you like, I like to use the word a fair income conversation. I began this presentation by talking about all human beings have purposes, concerns and circumstances. And I know they're always on show. So now, Ruth, what I'd like to ask you to do is just say to Peter, look, I've only been listening for a few minutes, but it strikes me this is what matters to you in this situation. It strikes me this is what you care about. What I don't want you to do is use his words. We're all smart enough to be tape recorders. He will know you really get it when you use your own words to connect with him. That's an intersection. I'm very good at repeating what my wife's just said, even though I haven't listened to her. And that's not meant anything sexist, it's simply I've learned the hard way. So really use your own words. It seems to me, Peter, this is what you care about, this is what matters. Yeah? Just do that, just 2 minutes. Just tell the person, if she doesn't get it right, just tidy it up a little bit. Go. As I heard for the last few minutes, this is what you care about, this is what matters to you. Just go. So, again, it was a taste, but I just mentioned for those people whose issue it was, and somebody was saying to me, look, this, as I've heard you, this is what matters, this is what you seem to care about. Well, what did it feel like to be heard like that? Give me some words. There are certain circumstances which overcome all purposes, in fact. Tell me, what did it feel like to be on the other end of that conversation? Give me some words. Sorry? Respected. Valued. Affirmed. Engaged. How quickly did you feel it? Now let's say this has occurred. There's been a conversation like this. Now it's time for you, Ruth, to give him some hard information that he might not like. I promise you he's now available to hear it. Would that be right, Peter? Because once I feel you understand my purposes, concerns and circumstances, which can be done so quickly, I can now give you, what you've done, and I apologise for this clumsy phrase, you have created a listening for your talking. You've created a listening for your talking, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable the next conversation is. Now we can start to talk about what we disagree around. Now we can talk about what our differences are. That, for me, unlock extraordinary value, which is back to creativity. So, my invitation to you for the next day and a half is to really sit in a curious space. Really think about what is it you care about. In any conversation, are you there to liberate, to be curious, to learn something, or are you there listening for compliance or agreement? And are you listening for somebody else's purposes, concerns, and circumstances? I promise you, you will change the world. Thanks very much.